Hello, everyone, and welcome to Attitude Magazine's ADHD Experts broadcast today. We are pleased to have tech expert Brian Friedlander here to talk about tech solutions for remote learning. Before we get started, let me note a couple of housekeeping items. Those of you tuned into the live webinar may download the slides now by clicking on the Event Resources section of your webinar screen. And if you are interested in the Certificate of Attendance option, look for instructions in the email you receive around an hour after the live broadcast. For those of you listening in replay or podcast mode, please visit the webinar replay page on the Attitude website, www.attitudemag.com/podcast-326/, for access to both the accompanying slides and the Certificate of Attendance option. So for many students with ADHD and learning disabilities, the same frustrating tech challenges are emerging that they experienced back in March. It continues to be tough for students to navigate online learning platforms and the demands of digital classrooms. In this webinar, students, teachers, and parents will learn about the most effective accommodations and tech tools to support students with ADHD and learning disabilities as they make the most of a weird new school year. We have Brian Friedlander here, as I said. Brian is an associate professor of education at the College of St. Elizabeth in Morristown, New Jersey, where he coordinates graduate programs in special education and teaches graduate courses in assistive technology. Brian consults to many school districts in the state of New Jersey and has taught thousands of educators how to utilize the tools and methodologies of mind mapping to improve learning in the classroom. He is co-author of Engaging the Resistant Child Through Computers and author of several laminated reference guides. You can ask questions of Brian during his presentation, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can after he finishes. That all being said, I'll turn it over now to Brian. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks everyone for taking time out of your day to spend some time with me. So during the course of this webinar, I'm going to pose some things for you to consider when you think about your child or your student in the remote sessions. Talk about some different tools that could be helpful. Certainly strategies. It's not always about the tools. It's really a combination of the tools and strategies that make a difference, and talk a little bit about implementation practices. So it's kind of interesting. I've been doing almost all my work now virtual. I teach at St. Elizabeth University. We became a university July 1st. So I teach all my undergrad and graduate courses using Zoom. I do Zoom webinars. And one of the things that I experience is how exhausting it is. And if we looked at the research, and that link at the bottom is an article about the research, there's a couple of reasons why. There's a cognitive load when we're doing virtual learning, whether it be in Google Meet or Zoom. One of the things that students find is that they're spending a lot of extra time processing nonverbal cues. A lot of what we pick up on when with other students is these nonverbal cues, and they're a lot more challenging in this environment. And it consumes a lot of their energy as they're kind of scanning and looking at their friends' faces or what they're saying. The other thing too is a lot of students are feeling a lot more anxious in their remote workspaces. And the other thing, which is really interesting, and sometimes I know that as a faculty member, I want my students to keep the camera on, but looking at your own face can be stressful, so the research says. So sometimes it may be a good thing for the students to turn off their video when they're in their session, and maybe need to speak to the teacher about that. The other thing too is that a lot of times students have difficulty interpreting the silence, whether the class is just silent or whether the technology, has failed them. So there's that constant, is it working? Are people hearing me? And so a lot of these factors really speak to cognitive load, and that's why it can be very exhausting spending a lot of time in distance learning. So just a couple of tips. Certainly, taking frequent physical breaks between sessions and timing them, and maybe speaking to teachers about that could be really important. I found also that if you can, having an extra monitor attached to your laptop or your computer can be very helpful for, seeing the presentation on one screen and having a note-taking tool on the other, or even knowing how to split the screen, whether you're on a Surface Pro, a Windows computer, or a Mac, so that you have a split screen for, student seeing the presentation, and then another screen where the student could be taking notes. Certainly try to limit distractions is important, and I know it's challenging with having other kids in the home and parents working, but we can try to do the best we can. The other tip, which I'll say is important, is especially as teachers are maybe going through a slide deck, is teaching the student or your child how to take a screenshot on a Mac or a PC or a Chromebook can be really important, so it can capture the information and they can go back and review it. The other thing too is trying to kind of keep organized with meeting links and appointment times, and just a strategy, since a lot of schools are using Google Classroom, or they're using Microsoft Office. I mean, certainly tying the meetings with the links into a calendar can be really helpful for allowing the students to get access to the meetings. And if your students are using Google Classroom, generally the teachers can publish the link to the Google Meet right within Google Classroom. So if you're looking for that link, it should be right in the classroom. And the other thing too is working with your kids, teaching them how to search for help when they get stuck. And usually a good place for help if you get stuck is going to YouTube and checking out a quick tutorial. So the other important tip would be for parents, teachers, and students to understand the learning management platform, whether it's Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams. Many of these platforms have, they've developed their own YouTube videos so that you can get a better understanding of how to navigate through them, which is really important. And most of these systems have their own calendar system so that students can see when assignments are due. And I'll show a slide of that in a little bit. Also, something that could be really helpful, especially for students with, attention and executive function disorder, is using a task manager. So something, again, if you're really tied into the Google platform, Google Keep is a really fantastic tool for keeping, doing reminders, tasks, and even for a research tool as well. And it's available on just about any platform, so it can be used on an iPhone or Chromebook, Mac, PC. Platform doesn't really make a difference. If you're into the Microsoft ecosystem, you can use Microsoft Lists, which is another great tool. And of course, it's a good practice is, in the morning, is to review the plan for the day and get all the necessary supplies and books ready. And some students do well using setting goals and or timers to stay on task. So those are a couple of quick tips. So this is a screenshot of Google Classroom. And so if the student logs into their class, they will actually get to see the calendar. And in the calendar, they will see the assignments that are due. So there should never be a reason why your students don't have access to this. So they go to the class, they go to calendar, and they can see when things are due. In addition, Google Classroom also has the feature where, again, if your school turns it on, it will automatically send a parent or guardian what work has been handed in and what hasn't, so you can keep abreast of where your child or student is at. So you may want to talk to the IT at the school to see if that feature can be turned on for you. So staying focused, there are a lot of online timers. If you just Google, timers in Google, you get you can have a number of them. Again, depending upon your child or student, there may be some that capture their imagination. But setting timers for realistic periods of time can be helpful to help them keep focus. Certainly, when I was in practice as a psychologist, we would often use timers as a way to help students stay focused. So there's lots of some really good timers that are available that you can use for free online. Of course, if you have physical timers, that can be used as well. But kind of more inclined as students are using more remote learning to have these timers available up on the computer. So I had talked a little bit about it, but using two monitors can make a really big difference. So you can see on the left-hand side, the monitor, you have your Zoom session, and on the right-hand side, you have a PowerPoint. But basically, you can put monitors into what's called an extended display mode. So basically, it thinks it's one large screen. And once you set it up, you can basically drag whatever applications you are from one screen to the other. And so this can be really helpful. And just imagine that you're in a Zoom session on one monitor, and on the other monitor, you could have your Google Doc up for notes, or Microsoft Word, or whatever note-taking tools you want to use. So this can be really handy, and as opposed to having to sort of navigate on one screen. So there are some monitors now that are fairly inexpensive, under $100. They don't have to be top of the line, and they can basically be driven from a Chromebook or from a Mac or a PC. So certainly one of the issues for students with attentional or learning disabilities is how they're accessing text. They're reading is text on the screen all day long. How are they going to manage that? So certainly using text-to-speech, and text-to-speech is a really empowering tool for students because it allows them to access the text independently. Text-to-speech is generated by the computer. Again, depending upon the speech engine, it may be a little robotic, less robotic. It all depends on the system you're on, but there are some really good text-to-speech engines on some of these tools for a pretty good reading experience. So whether your student is in Google Classroom or they're in Microsoft Teams, they can certainly use the text-to-speech. If you're in the Microsoft platform, Microsoft has done an incredible job of adding something called the immersive reader, and they have basically added immersive reader to just about every application. If you use their browser, Microsoft Edge, which is the latest browser in Windows 10, it has the text-to-speech built into the browser itself. So students can go to any website and right-click, select some text, right-click, and it will start reading. In Google Chrome, things like Snap and Read, or even Speak It or Read and Write for Google Docs has a really good text-to-speech engine. So it would allow them to read directions in an assignment in Google Classroom or read information on the web. As I mentioned, Immersive Reader is embedded in Microsoft Edge, as well as Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. And it provides a number of features, not only text-to-speech, but it provides picture supports. It also provides the ability to change what the text looks like in terms of colors and background. So it's a really fantastic application. If you're looking for something that's not on the computer and your child needs support for reading, the C-Pen Reader is a personal scanner. So you could take a worksheet or a book or a textbook and basically scan over the text, and it will read the text to you in a high-quality text-to-speech engine. Not only can the C-Pen Reader be used for reading, but if you plug it into a Mac or a PC or a Chromebook with the USB cable provided, students can scan text into Google Docs. So I have a lot of students, especially at the high school, college level, that want to take notes. So they basically plug the C Pen reader into their computer, and then they can basically scan notes from the textbook into their word processor of choice, and then using the text-to-speech, they can have it read back to them. So it makes for a really nice solution. Certainly, if for students that have a learning disability, dyslexia, giving them access to audiobooks is really important. They can access them from Learning Ally, which provides human narrated audiobooks, or Bookshare, which uses text to speech, or from your public library. The service is called Libby, formerly Overdrive, and you can take out audiobooks from your public and municipal libraries. I think it's really important that we help students to understand that they can read with their ears instead of their eyes. The research shows that there's no difference in terms of comprehension when students do this. I've worked with some very bright dyslexic students who have been very successful in college, in large part due to the fact that they access text-to-speech and audio books. If you have a chance, go on YouTube and take a look at some of the videos about Learning Ally and Bookshare and Libby to get a better idea of what they can do to help your students. But giving them access to these tools is really important. And it's also important when you think about transition planning, because these are the tools that are going to make your students or children more independent when they move from high school to college. So these are really important to put into the hands of your children and students prior to getting to college. You want to give them that experience using the tools and figuring them out, and allowing them to figure out what's the best way for them to use it. Just gonna. So producing written material, during the time of remote learning, students are being asked to produce some material. Certainly one strategy that I employ and a lot of special educators employ is using mind mapping software for brainstorming and organization. And some of these, actually all three are available online. So MindView Online, this is an online tool, and it allows students to quickly get their ideas down, on the screen. And this is all through the browser. What's nice is MindView Online also has a citation tool. So for students that are doing research or have to create a bibliography, it's built into this particular tool. Then you have MindMeister, which is another really fantastic mind mapping tool that's available through the browser. This has some really interesting features. One of the interesting features for students that may be doing research on a particular topic, it has the ability to, when you put your concept, say you put down the Apollo space program, you can click on a button and it will pull information from the internet about that topic. So it puts it into a note field so students can get some basic grounding in the idea or topic ahead of time. And Idea Mapper is a standalone application, but they are beta testing, and you can actually try Idea Mapper on a Chrome browser or in the Chrome in a Chromebook or the Chrome browser. What's unique about Idea Mapper is that students get to see their graphic display of their ideas along with an outline. So it's a very powerful writing tool. And these can be kind of used as a pre-writing strategy before students open up a word processor, which can be kind of daunting. Some of these also have templates to guide students in the writing process, which can be really helpful as well. One of the tools that is really kind of level the playing field and really change the work that I do is the whole area of voice typing or speech recognition. Both Apple and Google and Microsoft have done an incredible job of adding automatic speech recognition onto their platforms. In the past, if we were using something like Dragon Naturally Speaking, it would take about an hour's worth of training to create what they called a profile for that student's speech pattern, which was very daunting because the student had to read for about an hour. And of course, many of the students I work with had reading disabilities, so I would have to sort of whisper the text to them as they read it into the computer. With these technologies, it's automatic. Nothing needs to be done. You turn it on and you start speaking. If your speech is fairly clear, it doesn't have to be perfect. A lot of these technologies use artificial intelligence and machine learning. So in a sense, they fill in the gaps. For many of you who are on today, if you've used an iPhone or an Android phone and you dictate a text message, there will be times when you'll notice that words flip in and words flip out because it's beginning to understand the context. So for example, if you said, I went to the beach today, it may initially have put B-E-E-C-H, and then once it figures out that you're talking about the beach, it puts in the word B-E-A-C-H. So using artificial intelligence and machine learning, these tools are becoming much, much more powerful. And many of the students that I speak with, a lot of them are very bright, and they say, I have such great ideas and I just can't get them down fast enough because my handwriting is really poor, or going from the paper, from my ideas to the page is very challenging. So this allows them to do basically a brain dump with their voice, and it's really easy to use. The voice typing is built into Google Docs. It's built into the Mac operating system. And if you have Office 365, it's built into Microsoft Word, and the Windows operating system has it built in. Just a quick tip for those of you on Windows, if you press the Windows and the H key, that will bring up the dialog box for their voice typing that's built in throughout the system. So you can be using that anywhere that you have an open application. So it's really powerful. Getting started in voice typing is easy. Sometimes the students I work with, they do get hung up because it's not perfect. That's okay. I would start out with having the students, if they have an assignment in Google Docs as an example, if they have to answer a short question for an assignment, I would have them start there because it's going to be much more challenging unless they develop some skills using a mind mapping application to write a research paper. But for a brain dump or for answering questions in 1 or 2 sentences, voice typing is a great way to go. As far as grammar checking, most of the programs like Grammarly are can be basically installed, built into Google Docs, and on the Windows platform, you can use the Microsoft Editor. It has some really good grammar tools built in. I know a lot of students are using Grammarly. It's fast, efficient, and they can try out using the free system, which works really well, and those you can try out. So if you haven't tried out mind mapping software, you can look up these applications and do a trial and see how your students or child likes using it. It can be very graphical because you can use images, which is really nice. So one of the other issues in terms of note-taking, students are being asked to do more note-taking online. And one of the, I guess one of the recent developments is using audio for recording lessons. And one of the really interesting products is Glean from a company called Sonocent. Sonocent has a desktop application for Mac and PC and for Android and iPhone. And what it does is that it allows students to see a thumbnail of the teacher's presentation, and then the student records audio that is synchronized to that particular slide, and it chunks the audio, it breaks it up. So students can now go to slide 1 when the teacher is talking about slide 1, hit a record button, and then it chunks the audio. It also allows students to what I call tag the audio. So if there's something that's important, they can tag it with a little flag that says important or a flag that says review. Glean is all cloud-based, and so students can access it from just about any device they have, whether it be a Mac, PC, Chromebook, or iOS or Android phone. So using audio gives the student basically the safety net, and they don't have to feel compelled to write every single word down. Glean does give students the ability to type some notes in if they want, but it's not necessary. So take a look at Glean. It's relatively new. The other thing, too, is Glean and Audio Note Taker are tools that are being used at the college level. A lot of colleges are no longer providing note takers, and so students are relying on Glean and Audio Note Taker as a way to take notes in the classroom. The other trend is through the use of using smart pens or digital pens that can record audio. You see the picture, that is a LiveScribe pen. The pen can synchronize what's being said with what was written down at that time. So students, and it allows students to then go back and cue the audio to the time when the teacher was saying what they wrote down. So just a quick understanding, it's not reading the student's handwriting. It's basically just time stamping what the student wrote down and what the teacher said at that time. And one of the important things about audio is that basically it's minute for minute. And a lot of the students I work with, and I'm sure your children or students, it's impossible. There's not enough time to listen to an hour lecture when you go home. But using either the LiveScribe pen or the Neo Smart Pen, students can basically timestamp the notes they've taken, and then click on keywords and go back and just review information that they may be lacking. I also recommend that students use something like the Cornell note-taking method with the smart pens, so that they basically, if you look that up, you'll see that the page is broken up so that there's basically the notes in the right section. Down the left-hand side, there are questions or cues that maybe they didn't understand information, and the bottom part is for summary. So using a digital pen like the LiveScribe pen or Neo Smart Pen is a great way to enhance this methodology using the Cornell note-taking method. One of the new tools that just came out, which I find really intriguing and interesting, is Neo Smart Pen came out with something called the Rico Digital Recorder. And it's a very, very small device that a student would bring into the classroom, and it works with their Neo Smart Pen. So the student would put the recorder on their desk, or if they're in a remote session, they can put it on their desk at home. And then using the Neo Smart Pen, they write in their notebook. And when they're done, they go back and they can tap on the keywords in the notebook, and the digital recorder will cue up what was said at that time. It's a nice solution because it doesn't use the smartphone, and it's fairly inexpensive, and it works really well. The Rico Digital Recorder, also on a Windows platform, can be synchronized with YouTube videos. So if your students are using YouTube videos, it can basically control the playhead, which is really, really interesting. Keeping organized, one of the, I guess, key strategies for just about everyone today, but it's got a little more complicated with remote learning. So as I spoke to you about earlier, using something like using tasks in Google Calendar is a great way to keep more organized. And again, it's integrated for those students that are using Classroom and using Google Docs. Everything is integrated. So if you get used to using the calendar, your kids, students will see assignments that are due in their calendar that's connected to their login. But Google Keep is also synchronized to the student's email account, and it keeps everything synchronized across all different platforms. So if you have an iPhone, you can load the application Google Keep. You can use it for taking photographs. You can use it for setting reminders, which is really nice. And the equivalent would be Microsoft Lists if you're in the Microsoft ecosystem. But I would highly recommend that students either use Tasks or Google Keep if you're in the Google ecosphere as a way to keep organized. Like I said, if they're using teachers using Google Classroom, they will see all their assignments and everything embedded in that. So one of the other ways that students can keep a little bit more organized is going paperless. And certainly it is an interesting movement. Working with students who may have not only organization, but difficult handwriting. Over the years, I've basically resorted to having either teachers or students learning how to scan their worksheets and notes and organizing them on an iPad or a Chromebook. It really doesn't make a difference what platform. But if you want to annotate PDFs, Read and Write has the Text Help PDF Reader. Don Johnson has Snap and Read. And there's also Kami, which is another application in Chrome. All those work in Chrome and allow students to open up PDFs and type right on them. In addition, for students that have reading challenges, as long as the PDFs are procured in an accessible way, all these tools can also, depending upon your, if you have a premium or not, can read the directions. So that's the other benefit is that if teachers prepare these documents in an accessible format, and what I mean by that is PDFs come in different formats. Sometimes it looks like a document to you, but basically it's just an image of the file. When a document is accessible, and what we say is when accessible, it has optical character recognition. Imagine that you have the different levels. So you see the image of the file on the screen, but sitting behind it is a Microsoft Word document. And when these tools go to read the documents, they're reading the Word document that's sitting behind the image. So there are tools available that allow documents to be OCR'd, again, optical character recognition engines that turn the image into a text-based document sitting behind it. And that's what would allow these different tools to read it. So if you have a student that not only has a reading challenge, but also maybe dysgraphic, you definitely want to take a look and see how you can create accessible PDFs that would allow them to annotate the documents. The other technology that I think we're going to see trending this year are e-ink writing tablets. If you've used a Kindle, Amazon has been using the e-ink screens for many years. There's generally, a lot of them don't have backlit lighting, and they're very lightweight, and they basically are used for taking notes, organizing notes, reading PDFs. I've been experimenting with one called Paper, P-A-P-Y-R, but I'm actually waiting for my Remarkable 2 e-ink tablet. And with these are not like the iPads. These are really intended for writing notes. They come with a stylus, and they're also great for organizing PDFs in a less distracting environment. Many of these do not have browsers, though they have Wi-Fi so that you can send your documents to yourself or share them with other people. So I think you're going to see a lot of e-ink writing tablets trending this year, and could be, again, a great tool for students that want to be more organized, and comes with definitely less distractions. So when we kind of think about looking ahead and where this is going, I think there's lots of apps, lots of tools that I even spoke about during this session. And what I generally say is pick one or two that you think has the potential to bring you the biggest return on investment, and just focus on those. It's impossible to do everything at once. And when you select those one or two tools, practice using the tools, not in the context of work that has to be done, but really more for kind of mastery in a more playful manner, so that your child or your student feels more self-confident using the tools and can see the benefit of it. Once they've done some practicing, try out the tool during an online class. Set up the class and have the tool available, and see how it works. It's really important to have the students as they begin to use these tools, and how we empower them is for them to reflect on what worked, what didn't, how can we fine tune it. And that's what I often do with teachers and families when selecting assistive technology out of the box. Sometimes it works great. Other times you need to look at different tools. So it's important to, once you've picked out the one or two tools, to refine your tools and strategies, and reflect on what worked and what maybe you need to make some changes in. That's me. If you're looking to learn more about these technologies, I do consult to schools, to families, and do professional development like I'm doing now. So please feel free to reach me. And just wondering if there's any questions, Wayne?
Yeah, lots. Some general questions and some very specific ones. So okay. I'll start with the general one. My child has a 504 and a meeting coming up to discuss accommodations. The proposed accommodations the school sent me are in-person learning oriented, and my child is learning remotely. Can you please go over some possible accommodations for ADHD that could be relevant to online learning?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and I think it's really that's a really great question. I think is do some of the in-class things, do they translate into the remote learning? I mean, so for example, if the student is getting support for reading tests or quizzes, I would say, well, we can certainly provide, let's say, text-to-speech at home for any kind of reading that needs to be done. Or, it may be that the child may need some coaching or some coaching from a teacher to show them how they can use Google Classroom or Google Calendar to organize tasks, or Google Keep. So I would try to see if there's a natural translation to some of the things I spoke about today, in terms of their equivalency, in terms of remote, environment, and see if it, and see what tools are available to support the student at home.
Okay. As a middle school counselor, I'm trying to help parents with how to stay focused when they're in front of a device. From your experience, do you have any suggestions? I mean, we've had several questions like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely setting timers can be really important. And I think that, for some kids, they may need to and teachers may need to understand that, maybe their attention span is 10 minutes and they need to get up and do something a little bit physical and then come back. I mean, it's even hard. It's even hard for adults to sit in front of the screen for hours at a time. So I think it may be important for counselors, parents to talk to teachers about the need for more frequent breaks than they are giving. It's I think when you're in the classroom, there's sort of natural break times that are built in. And as I said before, there is a very kind of big cognitive load when you're online. So I think, certainly teachers need to do that. And teachers can also kind of check in with students to see that they're actually paying attention. I know there's a lot of paraprofessionals that are working online, and they can certainly kind of help and maybe chat with the student or kind of cue them to try to, keep them engaged in online as well.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that could be an accommodation. Those 15 after 15 minutes, that would be one maybe.
Yeah. Or, again, like I said, have the paraprofessional kind of check in with the student after 10 minutes, either through chat, which would be private, which might be really helpful as well.
Yeah. As I said, there are a lot of specific questions as well. How well do the text-to-speech tools work with math textbooks?
Math's much more challenging, and it would depend on how the text, if the publisher, how they prepared the documents. There are some technologies that where text-to-speech can work really well, but the text itself has to be prepared in a certain way. I mean, for basic word problems, text-to-speech will work okay, but you get into more sophisticated, like, differential equations, it would, the publisher would have had to prepare the documents in a certain manner. But I would take a look at Read and Write for Google Chrome. They have worked with a number of companies, and you may find some good success with their text-to-speech engine.
Mm-hmm. Several parents have asked, is using multiple monitor screens distracting for students? Have you found that or not?
No, because I personally think it's really helpful because it kind of breaks up, and it, I think sometimes kids lose focus because they may be trying to multitask, and this one screen, it kind of gets in the way. So this way they can kind of focus on the content and take notes, as well. So I think it's definitely, worth trying. And like I said, monitors are not that expensive these days, and they don't need a really high-end one to do it. So I would certainly, give it a try, again, with the focus on them not playing games on the other monitor, but having, let's say, their Google Docs up to take notes, or a PowerPoint taking notes, things of that sort.
Here's a specific one. How do students access closed caption in Zoom?
So that's an interesting question. Right now, I did see somewhere they were supposed to roll it out, but right now it's through third-party APIs. So that generally, like I just participated in our state tax center webinar, and the director there had to basically pay a third party to come in and actually, do the closed captioning. So I'm hoping that, Zoom itself will include it as part of their interface. Right now, it's through third party, or you can also set it up to give someone access to the captions, but they'd be typing them. You need, let's say, that paraprofessional or teacher actually typing it. There is automatic closed captioning that's built into Google Slides. Teachers can turn that on. And also there is closed captioning in PowerPoint, Office 365. The one in PowerPoint is very powerful because if you're a teacher and let's say you have a number of students that English is not their native language, but you have a lot of students who are Portuguese, you could set the language to Portuguese so you speak English and the captions are in Portuguese. It also will generate a transcript at the end of the session that you could then take and email to the student. There is a web-based captioner that's free. It's called webcaptioner.com. And so teachers may want to take a look at that. I suspect Google Classroom will add it to shortly in that they have it basically embedded in Google Slides. So I'm sure it's on the roadmap soon.
Mm-hmm. Several questions. Do a lot of these tools work in other languages? This is a teacher who's saying, I have a large number of Spanish-speaking students and parents struggling with reading, writing, and organization.
So if they could be more specific, do they want, like, for example, like the example with the PowerPoint, you could be speaking English and the closed captioning can be Spanish. They're also in, I know in Microsoft Office 365, you can dictate in Spanish. I'm not sure about that in Chrome. So those are, I know there are some word prediction applications that you can work in Spanish, and Google has a lot of translation services that are built in to quickly go from one language to the other. So students can type in Spanish and then convert it to English if they wanted. So that's possible as well.
Mm-hmm. One of the parents who's attending suggests that Equatio, I don't know if you've heard of that, works well for math. That's EQA.
Yes.
EQUATIO.
Yeah.
So,
Equatio allows students to use either dictate or type their mathematical expressions, and that again, because it's the way it's prepared, using their text to speech, it will read it accurately. So if teachers, in a sense, use that in their math classes, Equatio, which is free for teachers, by the way, it's by Text Help, which publishes Read and Write for Google Chrome. It will read math appropriately. They also have they also embed the Desmos graphing calculator, and also basically a math virtual workspace as well. So again, if teachers spend the time, it could be a way for them to create various math materials and make accommodations for students. And it also allows students to respond using Equatio. So Equatio is free for teachers, but in order to use it with students would need to have a subscription or a licensed account. And that's usually something done at the district level.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One other suggestion, then I'll get on to one parent who says Microsoft Windows 10 has the ability to split the screen, and sometimes that is enough for her student, her child.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Excellent. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Several parents have asked about tools for kids kindergarten through third grade. Is there anything?
Yeah, I mean, in the area of math, there's lots of like virtual manipulatives that can be really helpful. It's almost like having physical Cuisenaire rods. So I think it's mathplayground.com. If you do a search, you can find them. So you can use like base 10 blocks, and they also have some annotating tools. So for kids that need more visual experiences with math, this is great. They have, activities like, money, time, counting blocks, tanagrams, things of that sort. That can be helpful. And also there's a lot of, sites like Epic and Vox that have talking books that can be really helpful. So, I mean, there's lots of those kinds of, multimedia sites that young students can take advantage of. and even things like Brain Pop, which are kind of informational videos. A lot of schools have subscriptions to these, to the Brain Pop, and these are kind of really interesting, very engaging videos for younger students.
What suggestions do you have for those who are blind, hearing impaired, blind/low vision? Anything for them?
Well, I mean, as far as accessibility, I mean, a lot of that's built into the operating system. Are they looking for anything more specifically? I mean,
no, they didn't. I just wondered if these tools had options for people who have auditory processing disorder or anything else that might be.
Well, I mean, all the devices have, screen readers built in. So, I mean, Apple has voice over. The Windows has their own called narrator, and Chrome has, has Chromevox, it's built in. So if the sites are accessible, all these screen readers should be able to access them without any additional software. But again, it's dependent upon how these sites were built, and whether, for example, alt text was used, when they created the website, things of that sort.
Mm-hmm. Several parents have brought up that their school system doesn't allow them to do the recording on the live scribe and other things. Have you run into that problem? Is it a hit or miss thing depending on the school system?
It depends on the school system. I work with some school systems that said, Brian, if you recommend that, you're never coming back here. And then I have some schools that are very supportive of the technology. And I think it's on a case-by-case basis. But there are some districts that will not allow the students to do that. And I think it's really short-sighted of them, because the audio recording tools are going to get better and better, and these are the tools that students are going to rely on, especially when they go off to get a secondary education. I mean, there are technologies like Otter.ai that use the iPhone, that use artificial intelligence, that basically you can put it in a meeting and it will transcribe the meeting in real time. So these are really important tools for students that may have language processing difficulties, auditory processing difficulties, or learning disabilities. So I think it's on a case-by-case basis. But I mean, I think what better way to practice using this than this time when we're at home? Again, I think it's important for districts to have policies so if a student's going to be using it, and in those districts where I have used it, they had a policy, that the parents signed off, the students signed off with their understanding of what, how they were to use it. But I think it's really important as part of transition plans to have students learn how to use these various audio recording tools as an accommodation for their learning. I think it's imperative. So I would definitely advocate and have try it. Like I said, is a case-by-case basis. But I think what better way to learn how to use it now that students are actually home. Mm-hmm. And as long as the objection I get is, well, when the child's in the classroom, they may pick up what another kid is saying, and then that kid can be identified. Generally, in Zoom sessions, everyone is muted for the most part, except the teacher. So it's a perfect scenario to practice using these tools, in a safe way. And so I think that's, definitely something that needs to be tried.
Any tech tools that you know of that are good for building vocabulary?
Building vocabulary, yeah. I mean, the CPen reader has a dictionary tool, and also Read and Write for Google Chrome has the dictionary tool. There's lots of dictionary.com has there's extensions in Chrome where you can basically load the extension and then right click on the word and it will read it. There's lots of those. I'm just trying to, there's one, I've got the name at the top of my head. There's a really interesting tool. If you Google it, basically you type the word in and it builds basically a mind map of words, synonyms and antonyms, but it's very visual, and a lot of students really enjoy it. There's a commercial one, but there's one that's in like public, in the public domain that you can use. That's really interesting. So you could put the word like fast, and it gives you all kinds of other words that you can use. And also Microsoft Word has has great options for using like basically a thesaurus. So there's lots of options for that.
Are schools required to provide these technologies for a child with an IEP?
If they're written, if the child requires it because of their learning disability, yes, they are required. It may not be specifically what you think, but they are required. So if your child has a reading, let's say dyslexia, it's determined that they would benefit from text-to-speech, then they would be required to provide the application or service so that your child, the student, can gain access to it. That's written in code. I mean, sometimes districts may not want to, but it is the law. And if you're not sure whether your child would benefit, then you can get a consultation or an assistive tech evaluation, as you might request an OT or any other evaluation, in your school district. But school districts are definitely required to, once they recommend written into an IEP, to provide the hardware, software, or computer for that matter, so that the student can basically obtain a free and appropriate public education.
Uh-huh. And there's a sort of an oh my God moment question here. Does MindView actually cost $349?
Yeah, some of it does. They do have a subscription. I don't know if it's $15 a month. The MindView Online. Some of these tools are they're desktop, and they've migrated them so they're a little bit less. So for a subscription, yeah.
How can a parent, teacher, anybody introduce these tools without overwhelming the student? I think you sort of addressed that. Try one or two.
Yeah, I would try one or two, and it, like anything else, I mean, some of the stuff is all these tools have tremendous features. I'd focus on the most essential. So, for example, like voice recognition. I mean, you can start off by having the student respond to a simple question about, like, what's their favorite food, but bear in mind that when you click the button and you dictate, that's great. Bear in mind, if you wanted to, you can learn 100 different commands to move the insertion point around the screen. But I don't usually start off with that. So start really simple. Figure out what you need, the most important thing that you need to have your child or student accomplish, and just focus on that feature that's going to help them to do that. Once you do that, then things will come up and your child may say, well, how do I move the cursor from the bottom of the page to the top of the page with my voice? Then you can get into that, but don't start with the complex. Start with what's simple and what you need to get done now before delving into the complexity of the program.
Mm-hmm. Two quick ones. I know we're almost at the end. Can CPen Reader capture teacher's spoken word when the student is listening online?
No, it scans text. It's not an audio recorder.
Uh-huh. For voice typing, how do students do this while in class without disturbing those around them?
I mean, when we were physically in class, some kids actually would go into the hallway. But the technology has gotten so much better that even with some background noise, it still works pretty well. There's also a company that makes a microphone that actually it deadens the sound, so they put, almost looks like a mask. They put it over their mouth and they can actually speak into it, and so it muffles everything. It muffles what they're saying and gives them the privacy and allows them to use the voice dictation feature. So that's another option. That solution is about $100, but I've actually tested it out with some school districts, and it works really well because the student can stay in the classroom. The students can't hear what they're saying, and it really does a nice job. It works well with the technology.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the hour is up. Thanks so much for being here, Brian. It was really good.
That was fast.
Yeah, went quick. Insightful and practical. I know a lot of people online here are attending suggested they learned a lot.
Good.
So, I think overall it was a real success. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks once again to all of the attendees for joining us. Please join us on Thursday, October 8th at 1 p.m. The topic will be how CBT and ADHD coaching help adults manage their symptoms naturally. And the experts will be Jay Russell Ramsey and David Gawerk, who's a ADHD coach. So thanks for being here today, everyone, and have a great day.